Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to the start of a brand new Formula Ford Weekend Warriors Championship season. We've got new drivers, new tracks, new sponsors, and new memories to be made as well. But as for us on the broadcast, well, it's the same cast of characters from last season back again for some more fun. My name is Ron Mons. Alongside me in the commentary booth is Charles Bushell, and in the virtual production hall, however, old buddy Josh Wilkie. Today we kick off the season at Oulton Park, a track which, despite being old school in its design, is still an absolute hoot to drive. This track can also put on some pretty good racing as well. So Charles, to pass things off to you, how are you expecting this race to play out this afternoon?
Well, thanks, Ron. And you know, you're right. It is an old school British track. I would say it's the little brother of Brands Hatch. Very much kind of the same mold. Very tight circuit, lots of elevation changes. Not much help on the runoffs, so you have to be very careful with your speed. And I expect a good race because it is one that it is a good track. It's a little tough to get some passes made, but there's a couple good areas to make passes. The front stretch being one, the back stretch coming out of Shell Oil down to the Hislops chicane should be a good place to try and outbrake somebody. But for the most part, it's a too wide track, even with these small cars. So it's going to be very difficult to make moves. So it may be that you make up some spots on pace, and then some other spots you just might make up by people making mistakes. So, you know, we'll see if we keep the mistakes to a minimum today, and look forward to a really good race.
You mentioned this track being the kind of the baby brother of Brands Hatch. I'll actually touch on that a little bit later on because Brands Hatch is going to be the next race on this season calendar. But speaking about the race that we have in front of our face here this afternoon, one big factor that we've had to deal with last season and this season as well is the weather. The Formula Fords, of course, do have rain in the world of iRacing, and I think we may be seeing that here this afternoon. I think it was 65% chance of rain for the race that we have coming up later on this afternoon, so we may see a rain-soaked Oulton Park once this qualifying session comes to a close in about 8 minutes time. I would sing Singing in the Rain by Gene Kelly. However, I don't want his ghost to haunt me for the rest of my years. And oh my god, we got some drivers spinning off in the qualifying session. Hopefully they don't have a repeat in this race that we have coming up later on this afternoon. And speaking of the race, for any newcomers new to the Weekend Warriors series, it is a 40-minute race. A pit stop is required by law, by the rules. You do need to take a stop, and you pretty much have to. The fuel is limited in these cars, and it only lasts about 30 minutes. So these drivers have to make a pit stop by the rules. They have to make a pit stop just to see the checkered flag at the end of these races. It always throws a big curveball in regardless of what track we're running on. It always throws a big curveball at these drivers, and today is going to be no different. So we got 7 minutes left to go in this qualifying session, and so far, Charles, it's looking very, very close all throughout the field.
Yeah, it's a pretty stacked field. We've got some newcomers. I heard you guys talking about James Berry, who's been running the Radical series that is broadcast here on Apex, and is sitting on pole. But we've still got our usual cast of characters up there with Green, Overstreet, McConnell, Race, Murakami, and Monty Ditchburn, all sitting up in the top 10 of qualifying. I did hear Stevie Ray, league organizer, talking to some of the drivers during practice, and he says what I thought was interesting was he actually checks the forecast for the track they're going to be at, and so he models the rain chances to what is actually going to be if you were sitting at Oulton Park. So if you're in the Oulton Park area, you've got about a 60% chance of rain this afternoon. So that just be looking forward to that. Also, he did say that even if you do have to, if it does become a rain race, there is a potential that you could make it to the end. He says, but there is a mandatory pit stop. You have to at least take that 1/10 of a gallon when you come in, and you do have to stop whether or not you need to or not, just to kind of keep things even for everybody.
So we may see some of these drivers go for a splash and dash, and really talking about the fuel strategies that these drivers may try and apply in a race. If it is affected by rain later on this broadcast, my mind harkens back to Sebring last season, where it was pretty much leak Sebring, as all of these drivers described it. Absolutely pouring with rain all throughout. I think we had the race winner win by like 30 seconds, and all of these drivers, they did have to come into the pits. However, one driver waited all the way up until the final lap, which I think that loophole that he tried to exploit was never there to begin with. However, right. Stevie, of course, talking to all of these drivers and trying to get that point across that they do have to come into the pits at some point during this race. This track is going to be a fun one. I always enjoy driving it regardless of what kind of car we're in, and it's always nice to have some good corner names as well. We just saw a driver go through Clay Hill, Water Tower, and turn number 9, Knickerbrook. I always find that to be a very funny corner name. It sounds like an old school, like 1940s recipe that my great-grandma would have made for my dad many moons ago. So Knickerbrook, it sounds, I don't know, it sounds like some kind of, I don't know, like American Depression kind of Great Depression snack or whatever it may be. Knickerbrook, I just like saying the word Knickerbrook. So we're gonna see many drivers negotiate that corner all throughout this race. 14 corners in all, and all of them more challenging than the ones that came before it. Charles, you're mentioning earlier on about the other challenges around this track, but all of them are negotiating it right now as James Berry crosses the line and does not improve on his time. However, he's still pretty fast at a 1 minute 40.046. So James Berry, a newcomer, surprising some of these drivers that have been here for a pretty long time.
Yeah, really doing a great job. Of course, obviously, as we said, he's 10th and a half ahead of Green. And you mentioned the track. Yeah, there's a couple of touchy points here in the track. This is one of them, Island Bend. It's their version of the kink that you would see at Road America and other things. I think the difference is with rain here, there's a lot of elevation. I think the rain probably won't puddle as bad as we had at Lake Sebring, it being a very flat track. And, turn one is, turn one is very difficult as far as getting your speed right. The final corner, Lodge, is very difficult. And then this is the most old school of old schools. If you try and cut that chicane, you don't get a slowdown penalty. You get a very violent decelerating event happening to your car with those tire barriers there on the apexes of those chicane corners. So that's the ultimate punishment for trying to cut the track.
That is very old school, ain't it? Hey, no track limits, warnings, no times being invalidated. Just, hey, you go off the track, bang, you go straight into a tire barrier. So, hey, old school design. It's old school fun that these drivers are going to be having at this track as well. And before we get really into crunch time here of this qualifying session, we should probably talk about the company that's going to make this series possible. We have some wonderful sponsors that we're going to be talking about all throughout this season. And here for a decent chunk of the first half of the season, we have one in the form of Sim Motion. Sim Motion is not only the sponsor of the official Formula 1600 series here on iRacing, but is a proud partner of the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors Championship. And we were just talking in that small little commercial break trying to talk about the point of Knickerbock sounding like a snack from the Great Depression. I think it would probably consist of like some kind of toffee, pretzels, and maybe gunpowder or something like that. I'm not sure if that would actually be fit for human consumption, but nevertheless, let's talk about this qualifying session, which only has about a minute left to go. And we see Chris Murakami in P10. He is in third place of the Masters drivers right now, and Jörg Mani is currently leading them. And another familiar face, Julian Ditchburn, is atop of the S2 drivers. So we're talking about Jörg Mani here, and I guess we've moved on from last season, so we can kind of bring this up. He got hit by many falling anvils last season, so you think now that we're in a new season, Charles, do you think Jörg Mani can finally take a turn for the better and try and hit the ground running this season, or do you think it's just going to be a return to the same?
Well, you know, if their attitudes are any different, I came in basically right at the start of practice, and everybody was on the mic, cutting up, having a good time, which is what they normally do. You normally hear a lot of chatter amongst the drivers, but everybody's in really good spirits, looking forward to the new season. So if their attitudes are any indication, then we're in for a fantastic season amongst all three classes. You mentioned Ditchburn Foy's right there with them, only a 10th back. Andrew Love down just a few spots down in positions. So yeah, it looks like the additions of a couple of new drivers are going to just make the racing that much better. And we've got our our Masters drivers and our regular veterans that are out here to put on a good show for us. Oh, and you know what? And one more thing for all the Americans out there, for the dads, Happy Father's Day. So we'll throw that in there as well.
Happy Father's Day indeed. I believe my dad is probably watching this broadcast downstairs. Probably by the time I come downstairs after this broadcast is over, he'll probably be asleep on the couch. But anyways, this qualifying session is over, and that's a beautiful drift from Julian Ditchburn. However, it ends in him nosing it into the tire barrier. Jason Green has shot his way up into P1. A nice qualifying time from him. That's only, what, 0.08 of a second faster than James Berry in P2. So very fine margins separating all these drivers in this series. Jörg Mani has shot his way back up into P1 in the Masters category, P3 overall, in front of this man, reigning champion in the Masters category, Antonio Reitz, in the 914 car. We'll see what kind of battles those two will put on in this race that we have coming up. Julian Ditchburn is still the top of the drivers in the Spec 2 category. He won in dominating fashion last season, won the Spec 2 championship in commanding ways in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors Championship. He'll look to try and carry that same dominance over to this season. So the qualifying session has had the checkered flag out for about a minute and a half, so these drivers are just puttering around the track, running their way around the track, getting a bit more added seat time. But hey, what I should tell you viewers right now is enjoy this view of a dry Oulton Park, because in a few moments time, once we switch over to that qualifying session, the race session, away from the qualifying session to the race session, I doubt very highly it's going to be as dry as we see Oulton Park be right now. Bill Walker heading his way through Knickerbock turn number 9. A lot of elevation change at this track as well, but despite that, the drivers were kind of pointing out during the practice session that maybe there's not going to be a whole lot of standing water. We'll just have to wait and see how bad the rain is and how long it lasts But hey, if we see rain involved in this race, that is probably going to be the biggest wrench that these drivers could possibly have thrown into their works.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Everything that I've seen when we've had rain races is it's an extra little thing that you have to think about. The racing line you've been using in practice and qualifying probably won't work for you nearly as well. It seems like you need to be on what they call the go-kart line, right? So you're off of the rubber onto the to the clean part of the track to get some better. And there we go. As we see it, we've got rain on the track.
We're going to be singing in the rain, and let's take a look at the starting grid for this race. Jason Green is going to be leading them to green. James Berry is going to be joining him on the front row. Those two, they're going to have the best view of all, a clean racetrack in front of them, and no mist to be found. York Monty, he's going to get a view of the mist from Jason Green and James Berry. He's going to be starting this race in third, top of the Masters. Antonio Reese in fourth. Soren Garrett's the driver from Belgium in P number 5. Julian Ditchburn, the Canadian, in sixth. Michael McConnell in seventh. David Foy, another Canadian, in P number 8, Megan Overstreet in P number 9, and Chris Murakami is going to round out your top 10.
Yeah, Thortolo in P11, Andrew Love in 12th, Alan DeGassis in 13th, Jorge Gonzaga in 14th, Pedro Carvalho in 15th, Philip Fernandez 16th, Benjamin Harris in 17th, Kevin Adrian in 18th, Bill Walker 19th, league organizer Stevie Ray in 20th, Gary Wolbolt in 21st, Paul Stevens 22nd, Jimmy Litbacka 23rd, Peter True in 24th. 25th is Ronnie Litz, Josh Justice in 26th, Russ Telker in 27th, Nick Tello 28th, Dana Bowes in 29th, and not setting a time, and rounding out our 30-car grid, JVC Istvan.
So that is all the starters that we have from this race. 30 cars, all of them producing mist. It is going to be a crazy, crazy season opener. It's going to be hectic, I'm sure. Turn 1, that's going to be a hoot going through Old Hall Corner. That's usually tricky enough in the dry, especially with the very unforgiving track limits, even though you do have grass shoulders, and I think there's actually lattice on the outside as well, so it's not like you're going directly into grass. You will probably pick up a slowdown penalty if you dip like 2 wheels off into the dirt heading through there. That's not going to be the main issue at the beginning of this race. The rain will, and you could also see the fog as well. Not a whole lot of visibility here at Oulton Park. I think this may be the weather gods punishing us, because if I remember last season at Brands Hatch, I made a joke which maybe should not bear repeating considering our bosses here at Apex Racing TV are from the UK, but I was like, hey, we're racing in England, and for some reason it's not rainy. Now it is. You can see a soaked Oulton Park, a sure and pace lap as well, so not a whole lot of time for these drivers to get any sort of tire temperature into their Formula 1600 race cars before we grab the green in just a few moments time. Last season was absolutely intense. We had photo finishes. I still remember Imola like it's the back of my head. It is absolutely fantastic, the kind of racing that we have week in and week out from this series, and here with season 3 of 2024, I doubt that is going to be any different, or going to be kicking it off in the best way imaginable with a rain-soaked race here at Oulton Park. 30 cars are going to be grabbing the green in just a few moments time, and the man leading them to green is going to be Green, Jason Green. He is going to have that fantastic view with that green flag out. The drivers are now on their way into turn number 1. Some drivers not only scrambling for position, but scrambling for a clean view of the racetrack. But Jason Green is going to have a commanding lead heading his way through turn number 1. Chris Murakami going off the track. I think there may have been some big contact involving David Foy. That was some pretty big stuff heading through turn number 1. But surprisingly, they make it through that first corner clean. I can't say the same about the rest of the corners on this racetrack, though. Probably we're riding on board with some drivers as they manage the mist and manage the dampness of this racetrack. It is currently still the man that started this race from the pole position, Jason Green, leading them, about to head their way through the kink of Island Bend into turn number 5 in just a few moments time. This is a fantastic overtaking opportunity, but it's also an overtake for one of the drivers. That's York Monty that's going off the circuit, ran wide heading through turn number 4, and he's dropped back like a rock. Turn number 5, as I was going to say, though, that's a decent overtaking opportunity in the dry, but however here in the rain, that's just going to be a chance for these drivers to keep it on the road and keep all 4 tires on their race car, because if they don't, well, they're going to be in a world of trouble. But so far, surprisingly clean as they head their way through the Hislops chicane for the first time.
Yeah, they're doing a great job, and you can just see them with no practice in the rain, no qualifying in the rain. It takes a little bit to kind of adjust yourself to driving here, and you see lots of cars just getting off the track, maybe hitting some puddles and aquaplaning. And oh, as we see right there is a prime example, trying to get back on throttle and just no traction at all. And off the track, that's Gary Woolbolt in the 902. So it's just basically easy does it. Try and if you make a mistake, don't try and correct. And there was an accident with McConnell and Race.
Ooh. Where is that? I think that may be coming through turn at number 12. We'll definitely take a look at a replay to see what in the world happened to these two drivers. Michael McConnell was towed back to the pits. He had some pretty significant damage on the rear end of that race car, so he is pretty much entirely out of contention, and we just barely creaked over to begin lap number 2. It's still Jason Green leading it over James Berry, with Julian Ditchburn running at the podium in P number 3. And Ditchburn is a driver that we need to keep our eyes on. He's always fast. He's the indomitable force in the Spec 2 category, but last time we had a rain race here from the Formula 4 Weekend Warriors Series at Rudskogen last season, he took the checkered flag, the top overall, not only the top in S2, the top driver period. He took top honors in that race. So right now running in P3, that is a fantastic result for the Spec 2 driver if he can hold on to that, keyword being if.
Yeah, it's he did a great job in the rain. Obviously got a lot of ability in these rain races, and you just see Race just get sideways and just no for McConnell to go. That's such a rough way to end up having to tow back. There was obviously significant suspension damage on the front. He couldn't get the car turned around. But yeah, just Race just too much through the corner, too hard back on the throttle, loops the rear end, and you could just see the rain is already affecting. And these are, McConnell and Race are very, very good Formula 4 drivers. Obviously, Race being our defending champion in the Masters class. McConnell always competing up there for top 5s overall. So, yes, just, it's one of those things is limited practice in these conditions, and it's catching a couple of drivers out.
And one thing as well when it comes to the weather discussion with this race, it's not only wet out there, it's also freezing cold. It's 65 degrees as a track temperature, which usually 65 degrees, that's fairly comfortable. But for a track temperature in a race, that is absolutely bone-chillingly cold. Antonio Reese was locked steady in a very close fight between himself and Jorge Gonzaga, another driver that I recognize from the radical sides of things here on Apex Racing TV. He's currently running 14th in what I believe is his debut race. So very good start from the driver of the 113 car, knowing Malik, I probably just jinxed him, and we're going to see the Portuguese driver spin off in about a few seconds time. But right now we've got a heads-up fight between these two, trying to battle as hard as they can. But one thing that I just noticed just in the corner of my eye, as it looked like Antonio Reese was maybe trying to eye up a move on Jorge Gonzaga heading his way into turn number 1. The gap between Ditchburn and Tulo is that's a pretty vast yawning chasm between the drivers running in P3 and P4, so the podium runners at this stage seem to be checking out.
Yeah, it does look that way, doesn't it? Yeah, and Ditchburn is obviously running P3 and doing a fantastic job leading Spec 2, but he's actually dropping a little bit to the front too, to Green and Berry. They're actually kind of pulling away from Ditchburn a little bit, so, and as now it looks like Berry is looking maybe at a chance to make a move here. Green with the defensive line going into the chicane. Got to be very careful from that angle. Oh, and just Berry missed the corner. Just carried too deep and could not get it turned in.
Oh, and Ditchburn nearly hit the back of him heading through turn number 8. That was very close to ending up in total disaster for both Berry and Ditchburn. Meanwhile, we've got some side-by-side action a little bit farther in the back. That's Kevin Adrian trying to get a move done and doing so successfully on Chris Murakami, who ran a little bit wide and has lost out on that spot to slide his way into P number 8. He is still, I believe, the second running Masters driver right now, only behind Jorg Manu, who as things stand currently has slid his way into P number 5. And Berry and Ditchburn have swapped spots as well. They're swapping positions, battling very hard. I'm sure Berry, you can see side by side, hang their way through the final corner. They make contact. That was very close to ending in total disaster for James Berry. Mega sideways. However, he keeps it on the racetrack, keeps all 4 wheels on his wagon, and is still running in P number 3. But James Berry, he's a very hard racer, and as my old colleague J.R. Gregory says on those Radical official broadcasts every single Friday here on Apex Racing TV, mastering the Radical SR10 in iRacing iRacing will make you better in basically everything that you drive, because that car, that is not a very easy thing to haul around the racetrack. Neither is this Formula Ford, especially with track conditions like we have here today. And Megan Overstreet, who we're following, is currently in P number 8, right behind Chris Murakami, who, despite having that mistake hang through his laps earlier on last lap, has dusted himself off quite nicely and is running in a decent position, P number 7, as things stand right now for the driver of the 901 car. However, that may change as Megan Overstreet has a fantastic exit coming out of turn number 3. They're going to be side by side going down the back, flat out blast here at Oulton Park. Megan Overstreet gets that move done to slot her way into P number 7. They're battling very hard, and again, the gap between Barry and Tulo is pretty big. Now it's about close to nearly 10 seconds separating the drivers running in P3 and P4, but from Tulo on back, it is a hornet's nest.
It really is. Yeah, it's Tulo and Monty 4th and 5th, and then you've got about a 4-second or so gap back to 6th and Adrian, and then it's just basically the rest of the field that are just fighting each other. So obviously pretty competitive in that group. Overstreet, Murakami, I've just watched them both take off tracks, so you got to be very careful. Oh, Murakami, did he hit the barrier, or did he just get? Oh, I think a lot of the guys in that we see Monty up front there as well, just rejoining the track. So obviously still struggling with the wet weather. And I did notice that a lot of those guys that were running, trying to go side by side into the chicane, were really trying to give each other a lot of room. It's obviously very clean racing, and they know that that inside line going into the chicane is a very, very tight angle. So they're trying to give the guys as much room as they can, but maybe to the detriment of their own race, getting a little too deep in the braking zone and carrying it out into the grass.
So this race has pretty much been entirely turned on its head. This is Chris Murakami running wide, hang through the Hislop chicane. I don't think he picked up any sort of damage, however, just very slow getting the grass off his tires after that small little off-track excursion. And speaking of off-track excursions, Jason Green, who was leading this race, started from the pole, has now dropped down to P3 and is 17.5 seconds off of Julian Ditchburn, who's now taken the lead of the race. So this is what happened to Jason Green. This is heading, I believe, into turn number 12 of Druids. Let's see what happened here. There's a corner that caught out Antonio Reese earlier on in the race, and he has a very similar mistake and nearly gets hit by Julian Ditchburn on corner exit. So Jason Green, with a small little snap on corner exit, overcorrected a little bit and was so close to hitting that tire barrier on the outside. Thankfully for him, he kept it out of the barriers. However, Jason Green, with that big mistake, that has cost him dramatically. It was looking like he was slowly pulling away with the lead. I mean, the gap between himself and Ditchburn wasn't too vast. However, it's a lot better of a position, leading the race by about a second than where he's at right now, running in P3, 18 seconds back, and James Barry has gone off as well. So the podium runners have started to feel the burn under these cold and wet conditions at Oulton Park. James Barry makes a mistake right after Jason Green made a mistake last time by, so now it's going to be a heads-up fight between those two. And I said earlier on in this broadcast, Julian Ditchburn, he won in a very chaotic race at Rudskogen, singing in the rain last season. He won that overall as a Spec 2 driver, and look where he is right now, 9 minutes into this race, so we still have a whole lot of time left to go. But with a 17.3 second lead, this is pretty comfortable for Julian Ditchburn. I think he just needs to keep it on the road. Yeah,
absolutely. That's going to be the key, right? Because he doesn't really have a lot of room for error. Because as you can see, you're going to lose loads and loads of time if you get off the track, and it just looks like the same thing that we saw with your one. There's a puddle, the puddle out there on the racing line on the outside of that corner, and he just caught it, and that was enough to break the contact of the tires off of the track, and around he goes. So Ditchburn's got to do a really good job of just maintaining his pace and just keeping an eye out on the racing line, because those puddles, they don't really move, but they grow and shrink over time based on the cars on the track and how much rain's coming down, or if the rain stops and the sun comes out. So it's his race to lose. He's just got to keep it under control for the next 30 minutes. So we're just 10 minutes into this race, and we're already, so many things have already happened.
There's still a lot of stuff that is going to happen between now and the end of this. I don't think we've seen a single driver come down pit road besides the ones that have crashed in this race so far, which is actually a surprisingly low number. I think these cars, considering the really tricky track conditions and the decent amount of runoff that you have on certain sections of this track, if you go off the circuit, you're not just taking a one-way trip onto the barrier unless you're heading through the Hislop chicane and get a little bit wrong. A lot of these drivers have gone away with their mistakes. Antonio Reese was very lucky to get away with that knock that he had earlier on this race. He's currently running in P number 8, right behind the Masters leader, Alan DeGassis, who's up 6 spots from where he started this race. And Adrian, you can see him in P4 in the number 32 car, up 14 spots in this race already. So some of these drivers using the chaos that we've seen thus far and using the mistakes that others have had to just cut their way through the field like a hot knife through butter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will make one correction. Stevie Ray, who is our perennial first guy in the pits for their normal stop, has already made his stop. He stopped on lap 4. So pits are open whenever these guys are ready and lady. We'll forget about Megan there. And as soon as they're ready to come in, they can come in and take their stop. It looks like we have a taker right now, Benjamin Harris.
Okay, so this is an interesting call from Benjamin. We'll see how it shakes out for him. I will say he was in the spray, which is not a very comfortable position to be in, regardless of what kind of car you're running. And so maybe Benjamin Harris being like, hey, we're in the pit window. I can make it to the checkered flag if I come into the pits right now. So, hey, I'll try and risk it for the biscuit and see what I can do with an undercut strategy. 11.6 seconds stop down in the pit box. So he's already out and away and about to hit the pit exit right about now. So it is 32.8 seconds down and away in the box and the pit lane for Benjamin Harris. He's going to be exiting at in 22nd, right ahead of Russ Tekler right there. So that's going to be pretty close between those two. Harris, these drivers don't have to change tires in this race because they run the exact same tires in both the dry and the wet conditions. However, that small little time, that 32 seconds down in the pit box, will cool off those tires a pretty decent amount. So that may be something to keep our eyes on when it comes time for a lot of the drivers to come their way down pit lane. We're seeing Chris Murakami in 15th. I think we may take a look at some replays of a lot of the drama that's been going on all throughout the race. It's been very dramatic thus far, and this may have been one of the moves that Kevin Adrian pulled off in that number 32 car to cut his way through the field. This, I think, is on Thor Tulo, heading his way into the final corner of turn number 14. Actually, no, that's turn 13 of Lodge Corner. They're fairly close stuff between those two of them. Exiting the corner, going on to the start-finish. Not so straight away, side by side, going down there, and looks like he's going to back Abbott before he goes into turn number 1. No, he pulled off the dummy on him. He backed Abbott, then went for it, and Thor Tulo and Kevin Adrian battling very hard at the beginning of this race. We haven't even hit the 15-minute mark, Charles, and we've already seen a whole lot of drama transpire.
What we really have, and you could just see that was a good example of that's, you know, Tulo was in the normal racing line, and you see the water just kind of pooling up there, and you can just see the car dancing around as he's jumping through those puddles, and it's just moving the car around. These cars are not heavy, and they're fast enough that, you know, you get up there and it's basically like skipping a rock across a pond. So you saw Adrian with the what I would call the alternate line, the rain line, trying to stay on the inside, stay on the clean part of the track, and, you know, go back to the pits. The one thing that is going to be a little different. Is, you know, the normal official session doesn't have pit stops, so this is kind of new, and so now the pit lane doesn't get a lot of use, so all the water is just going to be there, so it's going to be even more treacherous getting on and off of pit lane than it would normally be, and it's going to be that much more treacherous than the racing track itself.
It's kind of interesting that we brought that up. Paul Stevens is out and away, only 7.2 seconds stopped in the box, but his pit time is very similar to Benjamin Harris, who was stopped for 11 seconds. I'm not sure what happened to Paul Stevens. I'm not sure if he'd be able to actually make it to the finish with that fuel load that he have. Jörg Mani, who I just saw, he's out of the race right now in P26. So right as we were saying that he's been struck by falling anvils all throughout, well, pretty much all of last season, we were hoping that he would begin this season on a much better note. However, it looks like he's going to be starting off this season on a somewhat sour note. We may be able to try and find a replay to see exactly what happened to Jörg Mani. I saw him go off the track earlier on. I think that was heading out of Knickerbrook earlier on. Sadly, I think the replay is a little bit glitched out for me, but I think Jorgmani had a very dramatic series of events.
Yeah, it's what it definitely sounds like, and unfortunately it's glitched out for me too, so I can't see it. But we'll see. Oh, there we got something here. So we see Monty coming around, very much in the same area that that we saw a couple other drivers have issues with. And oh, actually, that's coming out of Shell Oil. Yeah, Shell Oil down to the back stretch. And then through the chicane, you can see Overstreet slow in front. He's right behind Race. And does he? Yeah, he gets over on that puddles in that curb, and just obviously spun the car. And he said, "You know what? I think I'm gonna go get ready for the Spec Racer race."
A lot of people, after this race is all said and done, are going to be upset with that damn puddle on the outside of Knickerbrook. That's, I think, the third or fourth driver that's been caught out by it so far. Not a whole lot of drivers very happy with the racing gods and the weather gods with how things have shaked out with this race thus far. About 17 minutes in now, and it's still Julian Ditchburn, the S2 driver, leading them. Gary Walbald, we see the driver running in 21st in the 902 car, has made his way into the pit box, stopping right about now. And you can see those wipers running on that Porsche pace car stopped at the end of pit lane. These drivers don't have to worry about that. They don't have any wipers at their disposal. I remember back in the day whenever I used to run a kart race in the rain, I would just have to wipe away the mist with my glove. So it was not a very good system that we had going there. These drivers, thankfully, in the sim, I don't think the rain accumulates too much on their virtual visors, so they don't have to deal with those shenanigans that I used to do whenever I'd race in the rain. Julian Ditchburn, he has the best view of everyone right now. He's leading 21.5 seconds over Jason Green, who is hasn't really pulled away, it must be said, from James Berry. The two of them made mistakes earlier on. Green made a massive mistake. Barry, he got caught out by that damn puddle coming out of Knickerbrook, and both of them have been hurt pretty badly from this race. And I wouldn't be too shocked if we see Kevin Adrian get involved in that as well, because I think that's, what, 2.1 seconds between himself and James Barry. So, man, we could see a fight transpire between those two for the last podium spot. That would be exciting before the pit stops.
That absolutely would be exciting before the pit stop. Yeah, Adrian obviously has done a fantastic job. He's up 14 positions since the start of the race. So apparently he's got this whole rain thing figured out. And as thinking about the rain, is the drivers and being team manager, I tell my drivers there's only two things that they do well. That's drive and complain. So you're going to hear a lot of complaints after this race about the rain, but I absolutely think it's actually a benefit. I think learning how to do this skill. Especially for a lot of these guys that drive SCCA in real life. I think this is a skill that I think a little bit of sim time will just make them a little bit better in their real life rig. So it's good to see this, and I think it's been a very positive addition to iRacing.
Oh, I absolutely love the rain. My dad used to call me a mudder when I was driving in real life, like a horse that does best in the rain. I guess he compared me to a horse, so I don't know, maybe he fed me a sugar cube whenever I was driving. But anyways, we have the lap time graphic up, and last time by, James Berry said a 1:59.555, so I think there may have been some sort of mistake that happened with Berry, that or he was just incredibly slow on that last lap. That could be part of the reason why he's fallen into the crutches of Kevin Adrian right behind, as we see Benjamin Harris negotiate his way around the Hillslops chicane there. That was a pretty nice move, it must be said, on Litzback heading through that section. Not James Berry, Benjamin Harris, he was one of the first drivers to come down pit road, was running in P10 when he decided to come in for that very early stop, only 12 minutes into this race, as we have some more drivers pitting. That's Andrew Love. Actually, no, I think he just got either disconnected from the session, Alt F4'd himself, or got sucked up into a UFO. Either way, a pretty high attrition rate, it must be said. I think we still only have 25 drivers of the 30 that actually took the green about 20 minutes ago. We just crossed over the halfway mark, as we see Litvak very slow on the back end of the circuit. Hopefully that's nothing too bad for the Swedish driver. But man, the attrition, not as high as I was expecting, Charles. I don't know what your expectations were heading into this race with a looming threat of rain. But I think Reisel's,
Oh,
oh
that's
my
awful.
God, that was a big hit.
Yeah, Harris lost it going into that corner and lit back up. Obviously, with the rain, it's just very difficult to get the car stopped, especially when you're not expecting a car sideways on the racing line. And lit back. Looks like he's got the worst of that. Yeah, definitely suspension damage on the left front. I mean, he's limping it back. He's managed to get it back to the pits, which is fantastic. He can take his stop, get his fast repair, and go back out on track and see if he can make up some of the time he's lost.
Right as I was mentioning the attrition rate in this race, we see two drivers come to blows. I was heading through turn at number 12, I believe that was Druids, where they actually made that contact. Perfect timing for me to mention how the race had been fairly clean compared to what I was expecting. Right as I say that, we have two drivers bang into each other, and I think we have some drivers coming down pit lane, possibly. You see some drivers on exit. That's Peter True in the number 388 car, the Brit exiting his way. He's out and away, was down pit lane. Actually, no, he was stopped in his box for 19.6 seconds. That's a pretty lengthy time, it must be said. Philip Fernandez stopped as well. That's a front nose cone missing off his car, so I think there may have been some sort of extracurricular incident, maybe with himself and Garrett's, as they've both been stopped in the box for well over a minute at this stage. So I think there may be some sort of major drama between those two that we'll try and get hurled up for you in just a few moments time. Thortulo and Reese are also in the pits as well, so maybe we're getting to that point where the drivers are like, hey, I need to do something. Maybe actually, oh, it is a drive-through. Hey, you can see Tulo out and away, and I think Reese, is he actually stopped in his box? I believe he is. So Antonio Reese coming in for a stop, Thortulo coming in for a drive-through penalty. Why would he pick up a drive-through penalty, Charles? You have any theories about that?
I'm going to say it's because there's a off-track limit that is instituted by the league, and I think it's 17. It could be lower than that. It's normally 17 for an official race. I think maybe Stevie said it a little bit lower, but obviously 13. I think is Josh. Is what he's saying in my ear. As a little slide around that corner. So yeah, with the rain, obviously track limits are a problem now because you're trying to get the car stopped when it doesn't want to, and trying to get a car to turn when it doesn't want to. And so probably, just if I have my guess, it's just taking too many off track, so you had to serve the drive-through.
Regardless of how he picked it up, though, that is not ideal for Thortulo. This has been a pretty good race thus far from the driver of the number 30 car, whose name I dare pronounce, otherwise I'm going to absolutely butcher it. He has put on a pretty good driving clinic so far in this race. Started a little bit farther towards the back, but he's made up 22 spots, which I believe makes him the hard charger from this race by a pretty sizable margin. So for Istvan, that's pretty nicely played. I believe there's also a series debut as well. So to make up 22 spots in a race as challenging as this one, even with the drama that we've seen thus far, that is very, very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we'll mention this. This is the first race of the new season. The color scheme that you see on the timing tower there, red indicating spec 1, green indicating spec 2. Which are normally the lower rated drivers. Obviously Ditchburn is being the exception, especially in the rain. And then the yellow is our master's class, which is drivers age 60 and up now. I think they've changed that with all the guys that were previously 55 and older that were racing grandfathered in, no pun intended there. So we do the new drivers. Obviously we don't have the graphics updated. Barry is a spec 1. Adrian is a spec 1. I think Istvan is going to be a spec 2, just based on looking at his I rating. Gonzaga, I think, is going to be a spec 1. And I think that's all that I see that doesn't have a color beside them. So those are that's where they're going to end up. So Istvan, I think, is actually running in P2 in spec 2 class. So that's obviously a fantastic job by him, up 22 positions and doing very, very well for a guy who came in right at the end of qualifying.
Yeah, a lot of these drivers coming in for their very first race, and it must be said, this series is always recruiting, and we always love to see some new drivers make their appearance here on Apex Racing TV and make their appearance here on this series. And I'll tell you what, it's a fantastic one to be a part of, and our producer on these broadcasts, Josh, is a part of the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors that we'll be seeing here on Apex Racing TV later on this afternoon. I'll tell you what, he's had a blast, not to put any words in his mouth, but he's had some fun running in that series this past season and is going to be starting it up yet again. Soren Garrett is in yet again. I believe this is second time down pit lane, so this may be yet another drive-through for the driver of the number 21 car. His first so far in this race, but definitely not the first for the whole field. That's maybe something that some of these drivers are keeping into consideration. Could be the reason why Jason Green, after that incident earlier on, has taken it fairly easy with the gap between himself and Ditchburn being 22.5 seconds. So maybe these drivers at this stage saying, hey, I want to take it a little bit easy, don't want to pick up a drive-through because that can absolutely ruin your race. That could be why Jason Green has left off the gas a little bit.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe he's not pushing nearly as hard, just trying to keep the car underneath him. To prevent that drive-through from occurring. Obviously hasn't taken his pit stop yet. Looks like, with the exception of race, looks like the top 14 are still yet to pit. Isfahan is in now, so make that 13. So yeah, it's one of those things that you have to keep in your mind, especially when you're in a rain race, because I don't think it's just the off tracks, which is a one point or one incident point. If you have one of those spins like we've seen a few of the drivers have, those are could be potentially 2 incident points. And then if you have contact with another car, then that could be up to 4 incident points. So all those come into play as we see McConnell coming around the 30 car there of Isfahan. So yeah, you have to keep that all. Yeah, Ditchburn's in now.
Yes, I'm curious how Ditchburn has managed this race thus far. A fairly spotless Formula Ford car, it must be said. He's going to be out and away after 12.9 seconds stopped in the box. He's going to lose the lead very, very briefly. However, Green and Barry, along with Adrian, they have to come into the pits at some point. It's a matter of when, not if. So we don't have a whole lot of time left to go in this race, it must be said. Only 12.5 minutes left to go on the clock. So Julian Ditchburn, I believe the gap has actually decreased a little bit when he came into the pits. I think it was around 18 seconds when he actually made his way down pit lane. So Julian Ditchburn maybe taking a little bit easy, maybe had some sort of minor mistake on that in lap, so that could be the reason why he dropped off a little bit. However, 18 seconds is still a pretty big gap, and he'll look to try and maintain that and keep his car on the road during this ad lap. Meanwhile, the driver that has taken the lead of the race is a driver that started this race from the pole, and right behind him is a driver that joined him on the front row some 28 minutes ago. Jason Green is leading them over James Barry in P2, and those two are separated by a little over a half a second, heading their way into the hit stop chicane on this 15th lap of the race, now dipping a little bit under that now. Ditchburn also possibly feeling racy with Kevin Adrian. He doesn't want to risk it too much though, because any sort of mistake from Ditchburn, he could incur some sort of drive-through penalty. If he has too many incident points, he could also wreck his chances of having a dominant win here at the season opening race. David Foy, who is one of the drivers that was contending with Ditchburn for the championship last season, he's currently second of the Spec 2 drivers. I believe he's running down in 10th in the number 726 car, so we'll see him out and away with Jorge Gonzaga right behind him, P11. Oh, this may be actually just a... Oh, no, this is not good for Istvan. These drivers don't have to take tires, as I said earlier on in this broadcast, so maybe a rookie error for the driver from Scandinavia. That is on the jacks. That is not good news at all.
No, and I think you're right. I think it may just be a rookie mistake, not really understanding the rules. But yeah, you don't have to take tires. I don't think that the tires are going to wear to a point that they feel like they need to come in and take them after 30 minutes. So yeah, just came back in. Maybe they made a mistake on track somewhere and damaged his car. But who knows? So we didn't see anything. I don't know if we'll be able to find a replay of anything there. But he is back in the pit, so obviously undone a lot of good work he's done during the course of the race.
Oh, you can see this is painful. It's clicked over to a minute now that Istvan is stopped in his box. This is absolutely torturous. The driver of the 30 car, I mainly put this on myself because I was saying he was putting on a fantastic show, and he was. He was up 22 spots from where he started this race, but sadly it has all come undone in the final 10 minutes. I think there may have been a small little swap-a-roo between Green and Barry. We'll take a look at that after we take a look at this replay of Istvan. This may be the reason why he was stopped in his box with the jack up as well, heading his way into the chicane on the back end of the circuit. Looks fairly clean through here, fairly clean. And looked like he clipped the inside barriers. Oh no, we see another driver? No, we didn't. I was about to say, did he get caught out by that damn puddle on the outside of Knickerbrook? No, he didn't. So I think he just came into the pits and didn't unclick his tires, but he's been stopped for a very long time. He was stopped for 1 minute and 17.3 seconds. So that was incredibly long for the driver of the number 30 car. I think there may have been some other extenuating circumstances surrounding the reason why it was stopped for so long. And I think this is going to be the replay of what was happening as we were taking a look at that replay. This was Barry and Green battling hard, going down the back straightaway now, side by side, singing in the rain. It was going to be Green that prevailed in this fight, but these drivers risking it for the biscuits. Maybe not the smartest move to battle hard, especially considering it was about an 18-second gap. Oh, that's Barry running wide in very similar fashion to what he did earlier on. So even though these drivers have had 30 minutes of race experience thus far, that chicane is still catching out drivers left, right, and center. It
really is, and yeah, they're just braking a little bit later than they need to if you're on the outside with the car on the inside, as we see Green coming out of the pits now. 10.7 second stop. Usually Green is one of the shortest pit stops during the course of the race, so it's no surprise that he's about a couple of seconds faster than everybody else. And so, yeah, it's just, we've seen that mistake with not just Barry, but with multiple drivers as they're battling in there, trying to give each other racing room and just running out of racetrack and deciding they're going to just cut it in, and instead of going through there and taking a much bigger slowdown through the runoff area, they said we'll just cut this corner a little bit and we'll make the chicane and we'll keep going.
We just had the graphic up there very, very briefly, but I think it was 28 seconds down pit lane for Megan Overstreet, currently running in P6. That was blisteringly quick, so I think she may be looking at some fuel saving between now and the end of this race, because that was a very quick run down pit lane for Megan Overstreet. Hopefully she didn't speed, because of course these Formula Ford race cars don't have a pit speed limiter, so hopefully for Megan Overstreet's sake, that was not the case. She's had a fairly quiet day so far, it must be said. However, it's been a good day as well, running in P6, as I said, up 3 spots from where she started. She's avoided the chaos, and as things stand currently, she'd be looking at a P4 finish in Spec 2, depending on where Adrian sits in terms of the class. That's Chris Murakami out and away in P14, the driver of the 901 car, and away 8.8 seconds stopped in the box. Megan Overstreet 7.7, I believe it was. Yeah, you can see 28.9 seconds down and away in the pit box, well, down pit lane, which I think is one of the quickest we've had so far. Outside of some of the drivers that have served a drive-through penalty, that was blisteringly quick from Megan Overstreet, so maybe giving her mechanic some Red Bull. What do you think, Charles?
Maybe so, and I think it's probably more that she was running in that pack, basically that was about P6, P7 on down, that was the majority of the field, and I think she just did a good job of fuel saving. She's another one of those drivers that does a good job when she wants to try and conserve fuel and make a short stop. I don't know if she's necessarily as good at it as maybe Jason Green is, but she feels like she can get home with that stop, so we'll see if she can keep running. But now she's in clean air, so the fuel usage is going to go up. Obviously, the rain is going to make it not as severe as if it was a dry track, but running by yourself now, you don't have anybody out there moving the air for you, so you got to do it all on your own, and it's obviously going to make more fuel need to be used. So we'll see how she ends up by the end of the race.
Either way, I think we're both in agreement. It's nice to see Megan Overstreet back on track. Missed a vast majority of last season because of some work commitments. However, with the summer around now here in the U.S., she has been able to race with us pretty much every single Sunday for the past month or so, and it's absolutely wonderful to see. James Barry has taken the lead of the race, and we're coming up on the final 5.5 minutes of this race. However, Barry has to come in at some point. This may be his in-lap. He's currently leading over Julian Ditchburn, only 8 seconds separating the two of them, which may not seem like while it may seem like a vast yawning chasm, however, Ditchburn, he was one of the first drivers to come down pit lane of the drivers that are running in the podium spots, and now Barry has come in, so he is going to be relinquishing the lead back to Julian Ditchburn, the S2 driver who we mentioned earlier on in the broadcast. Dominated, absolutely dominated last season in the Spec 2 championship. Really should be in Spec 1 at times. I think his iRating is more conducive to a Spec 1 driver, but hey, if he wants to run in Spec 2 and absolutely dominate it, hey, it's not my apology to give to all the other competitors that are trying their best to catch up to Julian Ditchburn. And even in this race, the Spec 1 drivers, they are chasing Ditchburn. You can see he stopped. He was 12.9 seconds stopped compared to Green's 10.7 and Barry's 10.9. So you can see he was stopped in the box and down in the pits for much longer, but he's still been able to exit with a fairly comfortable lead. So Ditchburn just pulling off some absolute wonders. It's a masterful drive thus far, and with coming up to 4 minutes left to go in this race, that 13.3 second gap is pretty soft.
Yeah, I think he's got the field covered. It's going to be tough to make up 13 seconds. Ditchburn obviously very good in the wet. We saw it last season. And, you know, when you talk about him running Spec 1 or Spec 2, I think the old phrase, no good deed goes unpunished, will eventually find him. We had that a couple of seasons ago with Trent Kramer, won the Spec 2 category, got the immediate promotion up to Spec 1, and did a good job. Obviously, not quite up to some of the other Spec 1 drivers, but did a good job when he was able to race. And so yeah, we'll see how long that Ditchburn gets to stay in Spec 2 before Stevie says no, you got to go up now. So we'll see how that all works out. Give a little shout out to Alan DeGassis, is up there in P2 in the Masters class, P7 overall, having a very good run, and is going to be challenging Antonio Race for the Masters class win here in the last 3 minutes of this race.
It's been a very good drive for the driver of the 904 car. We haven't talked about him too much, as we see Jorge Gonzaga in the 113 exit the pits. He is right in front of Chris Murakami. Actually, I think that may be a lapped car there. We apologize for that. Chris Murakami is running in P13 as things stand at the moment. I think we may have had a driver drop out of the race. Was that Justice possibly that dropped down away? I saw a big refresh on our live timing screen, so that threw me for a loop. Yes, it is Justice stopped in the box with missing a front nose cone as well. So I think there may have been some sort of off for Josh Justice, a Spec Racer Ford driver in real life, and we'll probably see him in the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warrior season opener coming up in about an hour's time after this broadcast is all said and done. This is heading through turn number 6, a big snap, and this is a one-way trip to the outside. Tire barrier, and there he goes, noses it in, breaks the front left wheel and the nose cone entirely. It noses it, gives a small little kiss to the tire barrier right there with the Bryn chicane that we aren't running here this afternoon. But another angle of Justice's major moment heading through turn number 6. Was it another puddle perhaps? No, I think he just just a quick little mistake in the rain.
Yeah, I think it's just too much speed. You get a good run out of Shell Oil to a very highly cambered corner, and it just feels like it just slingshots you out of it. And he was just carrying as much speed as he thought he could go around that little corner, headed up to the Britain chicane, and just lost the rear of the car, and one-way trip to the tire barrier, and that is race done, I'm going to assume, for Josh.
And we thought it was race over for Estevan, who actually has not left the session, even with that 1 minute 17.3 second pit stop, or however long it is. He's still running out there on track, and I think he will gain one spot as Thortulo has dropped out. I'm not sure if that's a small little connection issue from him, or perhaps he just decided to call it quits here this afternoon. Now I don't see some sort of connection issue, so I think Thortulo may have made some sort of mistake, along with Stevens. So two drivers running solidly inside the top 15 have dropped out on what may be, I believe, the final lap of the race. If not, we're coming up very close to it. Less than a minute left to go on the clock. I'm not sure where Julian Ditchburn is. There he is, running his way through turn at number 3 for what is going to be the final time. And Ditchburn absolutely dominant in this race. He had, well, was it a 22-second gap by the time he came down pit lane over this man, Jason Green, in P2. And still, even with the pit stop said and done, with 30 seconds left to go on the clock and about half the racetrack left to go for Julian Ditchburn, he has a 15-second advantage over Jason Green. If there's a commentator's jinx I may pull off, I deeply apologize, but it's been a very well composed race for really all of these drivers that are on the lead lap, which is a very exclusive club, as James Berry trying to keep it off the barriers there, dip 2 wheels off into the grass, running his way around Island Bend. That's not going to be a very comfortable moment for him. He's going to be occupying the final podium position. Adrian, who we thought was going to challenge him, has actually lost touch with Berry. Those two separated by about 12 seconds on the last lap of this race. Megan Overstreet running in a fantastic P5, and this man Antonio Reese is about a half a lap away from winning yet again in the Masters category here from the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors Championship. He enters this season as the reigning Masters champion, and it looks like he's going to start off this season in very similar fashion. DeGasse is a little bit farther behind, along with Foy and Harris, but this man Julian Ditchburn has put a clinic on the field. He's lapped everyone up until McConnell in P10, and Julian Ditchburn rounds his way around the final corner, and he goes onto that start finish not so straight away. He's singing in the rain today as Julian Ditchburn wins. The Spec 2 driver wins it overall to kick off this Formula Ford Weekend Warriors season. That's going to be a long wait until we see this man Jason Green come across the finish line at a few moments time. It's been a very slow final lap, as must be said. He's lost about 2 seconds to Ditchburn on this lap alone, but he ends up in P number 2, and that's another long wait until we see the newcomer Brit James Berry in the number 10 car round out your podium in third. But Ditchburn, it was kind of a shot in the dark one. I wouldn't say it was too much of a shot in the dark when I mentioned that Ditchburn would be a driver that we have to keep our eyes out for. But Ditchburn showing what we saw last season at Rudskogen, keeping his head cool and keeping calm towards the end of this race to take the checkered flag. It's not calm between these two. Megan Overstreet and Antonio Reese separated by about 0.3 of a second, hang their way into the final corner now. The final braking zone is out of the way, so Megan Overstreet trying to focus to get a great exit going onto the start-finish section here. Megan Overstreet is going to round out your top 5. But getting back to the subject and talking about Julian Ditchburn, he's always been very fast in the rain in these race cars, but I think his key to winning it today may have just been keeping his head cool and just keeping it on the racetrack more than anything else.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Obviously, he does have really good pace in the wet, and showed it again today. And, you know, I was sitting there thinking about it as we were wrapping up that final lap. Ditchburn's number last season was 393, not 193. And Spec 1 drivers have between 0 and 2 and 199. So I'm going to guess that he's been promoted. We just don't have the graphic updated. So I think he is actually Spec 1 this season, which is what normally happens when you win the Spec 2 category. You get that promotion up. And as we Garrett's was a slam off the wall. And I will say this:
he's got some damage on that car too.
Yeah, he's just trying to. I think he's already crossed the checkered flag, so just running his in lap, and just trying to bring it back home. I was wondering if it was dry, we probably would have had some aerial acrobatics. There's a nice little jump coming out of turn 3 that you just drive straight through the grass and up over onto the backstretch. But no such luck today because of the rain, I think, or is he lining this up? We'll see.
Oh, God bless America. I think he may be. Jason Green stopped right before turn number 3. He's running his way through there now, and yes, he is going for the jump. Jason Green, it may be one of the saddest jumps of the world, and Jason Green books it, going onto the back straightaway. And it's not the most well-executed jump in the world, it must be said. He's definitely, if that was in real life, he definitely suffered some pretty severe internal and external injuries as well. And that car was pretty whooped. Jason Green has made his appearance here on Apex Racing TV on the past Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race at New Hampshire last season. He actually made it onto the Apex Racing TV Instagram page with that jump that he did there. So yet again, Jason Green, the standout star, he kept it on the road and ended up this race in P number 2, but he wins our hearts with that attempt at a jump after the checkered flag. My oh my, that was glorious.
Yeah, it was nice, and you know, he had to back it in because rain just wouldn't let him keep the car straight. But you know, mission accomplished. Got over the barrier onto the backstretch and onto his lid. So as we see, the 32 car just having a little fun there and just trying to cake that flat, and obviously not possible. Adrian trying to get that run out of there and taking it flat, as we'll get the replay here of Jason Green lining this jump up. to cap off the end of the race. Fantastic race, lots of drama. You know, it was still, even with the rain, we didn't have a lot of major catastrophes, as we see Jason clearing the barrier, landing on his lid, and that's the end of that. So, but otherwise, really good race. Obviously, Ditchburn class of the field in the rain. So well done to all of our drivers to get through this first weekend.
I gotta compose myself here real quick. I was just laughing. Hopefully that didn't get picked up on the microphone. Alrighty, we're gonna take a look at the results from this season opening race from the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. It's Julian Ditchburn winning it. We believe he may be in Spec 1. Either way, he takes a checkered flag overall. 17.1 seconds over Jason Green in P number 2 with that 10 out of 10 jump on the outside of turn number 3. Speaking of 3, it's James Berry, the driver of the number 10 car on series debut, will round out your podium in 3rd. That's Kevin Adrian, the hard charger from this race, started a little bit farther towards the back, but the Canadian ends up in 4th and makes up 14 spots when everything is said and done. Megan Overstreet ends up in 5th. Antonio Reese, the top of the Masters drivers, is going to be P6 overall. Right behind him is Alan Degas, is very, very close, but a fantastic race from the driver of the 904 car to end up 7th and 2nd in the Masters category. That's David Foy, who we believe may be the winner in the Spec 2 category. I believe he would be if Ditchburn has gone that promotion up into Spec 1. So David Foy, if that is the case, he is your winner from the season opening race. Benjamin Harris, one of the first drivers to come down pit lane, he ends up in P number 9. And Michael McConnell, who we didn't really talk about too much, got involved in that first lap incident with Antonio Reese, and despite that, he cut his way through the field like a hot knife through butter and ends up rounding out your top 10.
Yeah, it was a great run by McConnell to recover from that incident early in the race. In 11th, we got Jorge Gonzaga, who I believe is also going to be Spec 1. Dana Bowes rounds out your Masters podium, finishing 12th overall. Chris Murakami, 13th. Stevie Ray in 14th. Soren Garretts in 15th. Josh Justice, 16th. Peter True with P2 in Spec 2. And followed by JVC Isvan, who I believe is going to be P3 in Spec 2. So great recovery by him with that second stop. Gary Wolbolt in 19th, Nick Tullo in 20th, Thor Tullo in 21st, Jimmy Litbacker in 22nd, Paul Stevens in 23rd, Philip Fernandez in 24th, Russ Helker in 25th, Andrew Love in 26th, Pedro Carvalho in 27th, Jorg Monty in 28th, Ronnie Litz in 29th, and Bill Walker rounds out the 30 car finishing order. So race 1 done and dusted.
Yes, indeed. Race 1 done and dusted for this afternoon. We've still got the Spec Racer Fords coming up later on this afternoon for Super Sunday here on Apex Racing TV. But before we wrap things up and move on to that Spec Racer Ford race, I think we should have a chat with some of these drivers that were involved in that race. And I think I'll bring in a driver who I've talked with both on these broadcasts and in the waiting area after I competed in one of the Radical races this past season. James Berry, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. This is, I believe, your first ever race here from the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors Championship. And, you know, usually you hear about trial by fire. That was trial by firing squad. So how was it out there for your first ever race singing in the rain at Oulton Park?
Yeah, I just came here to impress you, Ron. You know me from the Radicals. You know me from the Radicals, and I thought I'd spice it up a bit. But no, I've been driving this car a little bit just for the new season and really enjoyed it. And, you know, I knew about this league from before. So I thought, yeah, let's jump in. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But turns out I'm actually quite fast, really close for pole position. That was really fun. And then obviously in the Radical we don't drive in the rain, so that was something new to me, so I was nervous about how that's going to go. But it was quite good. It was quite intuitive, really natural car to drive, so I got on quite well with it and made a few mistakes, few spins. Jason made it difficult to pass him when I was trying to go on the outside and I lost the grip. But yeah, happy overall.
I'll tell you what, though, in terms of that qualifying performance being so close to the back of Jason Green's pole position time, to be that close to the driver that finished second in Spec 1, the Spec 1 championship last season, that had to put some wind in your sails. So heading to Brands Hatch in 1 week's time, hopefully in the dry, we'll just have to wait and see what the forecast looks like. How do you fancy your chances at not just that race, but the entire season if it remains dry?
You know what? I don't know if I'm going to be here next week or not because half an hour after this race ends, we're going to have the Radical European Championship race as well. So I'm going to wait and see.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
But I'm going to make as many races as I can. And obviously, yeah, as I said, I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into, but clearly I have good pace. So anything can happen, I guess. Yeah, let's see. I'll do my best.
I can't believe I forgot about that. I do the Americas broadcast later on that afternoon, along with me, Charles, and Josh, so that was a complete oversight from my part. So after that week, and so long as it isn't interfering with any of the Radical European Championship races that you're doing that are also broadcasted here on Apex Racing TV, occasionally on Sundays, you think you're going to try and stay with this series? How was your first time, and what do you think of this? What do you think of this series, and what do you think of the championship?
Yeah, I'm aware there's drop weeks. There's, I think, 9 out of 12 best races count, so that might help me. But obviously, I want to do as many races as I can because I had a lot of fun today and I really enjoyed the car. And I'm sure wherever we go, there'll be good racing. So, yeah, I'm going to be here as much as possible, I think, this season. So, looking forward to it.
Alrighty, sounds good. So, James Berry, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. Is there anyone you want to give a thanks to or shout out?
Not yet because I don't really know anyone here. So. No, we'll see in the future. But yeah, just I guess you, Ron. Good to see you again. Good to see his familiar face.
Alrighty, good to see you as well, James. I'll probably be in the Radical official broadcasted race as long as I make it into Top Split this upcoming Friday. So I'll also have a chat with you then. Thank you for joining us in the commentary booth. Hope to see you all throughout the rest of this season, my friend.
Thank you. Cheers, guys. Bye.
And that was James Berry, who I'm sure is going to get a message from series admin Stevie Ray after that interview. And Charles, would you like to have a chat with Antonio Reese?
Yeah, I think I absolutely would. Let's have a chat with Antonio. Antonio, so dry practice, dry qualifying, wet race. Obviously looked like you had a little incident with McConnell there at the start, but managed to stay in there and pick up the Masters class win.
Hey, hello, good night, everyone. Yeah, well, it's kind of, I start 4 and finish 6 on overall, but yeah, I was just never give up, kind of a stuff.
Yeah, that seems to be the name of the game here, is just trying to stick through the whole race and try and minimize the mistakes, and you did a fantastic job. And it just seemed like it was pretty much a battle. There was a couple of cars that were just, kind of head and shoulders above everybody else, but that I guess mid-pack battle was pretty intense for most of the race.
Yeah, well, yeah, the most difficult was to keep the car on the track. Since when start battling side by side, we tend to do more mistakes than usual.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, was really nice. I'm not used to the rain. I didn't even practice, so I'm kind of a very, very bad driver on the rain, but somehow survive.
Well, that's the whole key to it. So, Antonio, congratulations.
Yep.
Is there anybody you want to give a thanks to before we let you go?
Sure, I want to always to thanks to Steve Ray, the guy that put everything working, and for the Weekend Warriors community, for you guys broadcasting, you do always a great service. I always watch every time, and I enjoying it. And yeah, for the viewers, all the viewers, and yeah, that's it. All
right, Antonio, congratulations, and we'll see. I'm sure in the Spec Racer race coming up in just a little while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll be there, guys.
All right, good deal.
I hope he's being a good one as well. We'll see.
It usually is.
Well, all right. Okay, guys.
All right, thanks, Antonio.
Thank you.
And that was Antonio Reese, the top driver in the Masters category here from the season opening race of the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors Championship. And Charles, that I think was one hell of a way to kick off this brand new season of the Weekend Warriors Championship. Rain racing is always going to be intense, and it's always going to be a lot more different than we usually see in the dry, but man, that's everything you always expect from a rain race. Hard racing, some good strategy content as well, but some pretty interesting storylines all throughout. Final thoughts on this race?
Yeah, fantastic race. It's a good start to the season, and we'll see what week 2 brings when we head back. And then you said Brands Hatch, I believe, next week.
That is correct. We've got an awesome schedule of races here from the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors Championship in front of us. We've got Brands Hatch coming up in 1 week's time, so remember to tune into that broadcast coming up on June 23rd here on Apex Racing TV. Then we're going to be going back to Sebring on June the 30th. Hopefully we don't see as much rain as we saw last season. That's mainly for the driver's sakes. Then on July 7th, we're going to be heading to Le Denon, I believe is the correct French pronunciation. I know one of my closest friends used to study French back in the day, so I may get a butt chewing from them after this broadcast is done. Then we're going to be heading to Knockhill, another traditional UK track, on July the 14th. Hungaroring on the 21st in conjunction with, I believe, that actual day's Hungarian Grand Prix. Then Winton, a track that we visited with the Spec Racer Fords this past season. Hockenheim on August the 4th. Imola on August the 11th. Oran Park on the 18th. Zandvoort on the 24th of August. And then to round the season off, once we hit the end of the summer, we're going to be going to Laguna Seca in California. So we've got some awesome stuff, awesome action ahead of you here from the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors Championship, and some awesome action coming up later on this afternoon with the Spec Racer Fords, their season opener event coming up in less than an hour's time, in fact, at Lime Rock Park. That's going to be a fantastic race. And speaking of, we've got awesome action all around the clock every single day here on Apex Racing TV. Gives you more of a reason to subscribe and hit that notification bell as well, so you never miss a single thing. But as for this broadcast, I think that will just about do it. So for myself, Ron Mons, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, and Josh Wilkie doing a wonderful job working all the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching this broadcast of the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors Championship, and we hope to see you later on this afternoon when the Spec Racer Fords hit the track at Lime Rock Park.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.